All right, man, peace. So, the NBA great LeBron James has compared this year's version of the Cleveland Cavaliers to an orange that he intends to squeeze every last drop of juice out of. And I bring that up for this reason. It's very clear that the United States government and the U.S. Supreme Court, they view America and its citizens as that orange that they're going to try to squeeze every last single drop out of. And the reason why I say that is because they have decided to legalize sports betting in all 50 states. When I say they, I'm talking about the Supreme Court. It's very clear to me that they're doing that because they intend to collect on every last penny that they can from the average quote-unquote U.S. citizen, aka debt slave, before they decide to liquidate this corporation known as the United States. That's the only reason why they're doing that. So they're basically taking off the proverbial training wheels of the average U.S. citizen. They're saying, we're not going to pamper you anymore. We're not going to coddle you. We're not going to protect you from your vices. We're not going to do anything to impede you from helping you make bad decisions. We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to allow you to smoke weed. We're going to allow you to sell weed. We're going to allow you to gamble on sporting events. And sports is one of the major religions of this society. People are captivated by it on a spiritual level, as opposed to just utilizing it for what it is. Sports, which means a joke, entertainment. And they're trying to really make sure that they bottom out on the average American citizen and what they feel like the average American citizen owes the government, which is basically just a small branch of the global corporation that's run by the international bankers. That's all this is about to me, because by legalizing sports betting, this is going to add a major economic boon to each and every state, which in and of itself is a little sector within the corporation known as the United States. It's going to add a major boon to all the courts, because you're going to have people going back and forth and being ran through the judicial system due to owing monies, due to divorces, because of the way that the sports gambling addiction is going to affect their lives, and of course being added into the prison industrial complex. So of course they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Sports Center right now, I'm Antonieta Collins. Huge news this morning from the U.S. Supreme Court for sports fans. The justices struck down a 1992 federal anti-sports gambling law today, giving states the go-ahead to allow betting on sports.
Let me also say this, to a degree, this is a bit of a return to the idea of a republic, to allow each and every state to decide what they're going to do in regards to many of their laws, their statutes, and what they're going to allow for their citizens. So that's why I state that it's like them taking off the training wheels. They're putting all the onus on the individual to make their own decisions. So we're going to see what people do. Of course, there's going to be a surplus of money that gets added to each state economy because of it. And that's really what it's about. So it's a no-lose situation for the U.S. government to allow sports betting. No-lose situation.
The legal battle began 6 years ago when New Jersey legalized sports gambling, and the NCAA and 4 professional sports leagues sued to stop the Garden State. The battle is now over, and New Jersey and those states which want to legalize sports gambling have won.
For those of us who've been paying attention, the NBA has really been on the forefront of trying to promote the legalization of gambling. They're trying to find a way to catch the NFL in any way that they can, because thus far, the NFL has been synonymous with the sports gambling league. The NFL is the sport that's truly the most suitable for sports gambling, because you have such few games that it allows gamblers to really go in depth in studying whether or not they want to invest their money on a certain team for that week. And that's really all gambling is. In a sense, it's just investing. In the same way you can invest in a stock and lose money, you can invest in a team's fortunes and lose money or make money.
Speaking of which, entering the series against the Cavs, the Celtics had worse than 2-1 odds to advance to the NBA Finals. But after Game 1's resounding victory, they are now nearly even to advance, according to Westgate Las Vegas Superbook. Now let's get you back to First Take.
There's a lot happening right now. I don't know if I can handle this. So before we get back...
Drink some tea and calm down.
Get back to Game 1, the blowout in Boston. States got the go-ahead to legalize betting in sports. Will Kane joins us. Hi, Will.
Good morning.
Good to see you, as always. Stephen A., I'll start with you. What's your reaction to this?
Before Stephen A. reacts, let me just say once again, I think that it's a brilliant move by the U.S. Supreme Court. It's a brilliant move in the same way that it's a brilliant move for a great businessman to get out on a business right before it's about to collapse. The United States is a corporation that is about to collapse. Once again, they're trying to make sure that they can make as many monetary collections from its citizens as possible. So it's almost like a massive call-in on debts right before you know you're about to go under.
Well, I don't have a problem with it. I think it was inevitable. I mean, Nevada, Delaware, Maine, Oregon, I believe, already had it. Obviously, the other 46 states did not have that. This opens the gateway for states to pass laws that will ultimately legalize gambling. It's something with the advent of fantasy sports, for example. I just think that this is something that's been going on for quite a long time.
That's true. It has been going on for quite a long time, but this is going to open up the avenue for additional revenue for each state. And this is why I brought up the legalization of weed, because that's the reason why each state is legalizing weed. They could care less about the so-called health benefits. They're more concerned about the additional revenue. Why is that? Because the American economy is crippling many of these states. It's not really based on anything of substance. So they're basically borrowing from Peter to pay Paul over and over and over again, having to print more and more money, which is something called inflation. The value of the money is lowering because of the printing of additional fiat notes. So right now they're trying to make sure that they can gather in as much revenue as possible, gather in as many fiat notes as possible, and see if we can create some added value to this money in some way. Of course, using the people as collateral.
You're talking about an avenue to stimulate the economy, local economies and what have you. I mean, I obviously there are negative elements to it that we all have to be careful of, which is why the sports leagues were against it until recently. I mean, I think...
Yes, they were against it until recently. I'm glad that you stated that, Stephen A. Smith, because they're all in. Believe me, they could care less. And I'm sure that they have been promised certain provisions will be made to protect them from liability on the back end.
I think back as 2012, they sued against, legalizing gambling throughout states because obviously sports leagues were very, very concerned about it. But in the end, it's been trending in this direction for quite some time. I'm not surprised by it. It's long overdue. Now that it's going to be legalized for the most part, you can legislate laws and whatever and implement and create laws that ultimately will monitor the world of sports gambling. And I personally think that it was inevitable, so I'm not surprised by it. I think it's long overdue.
Well, Stephen A.
And you're also going to have most likely some type of licenses for bookies now. So the government will be able to take, each state government will be able to take their cut from each and every bookie. So that will add a bit more order and functionality to that vocation. You won't see any more rogue loan sharks and bookies running around out here having people's legs broken, etc. Now you just report them to the police. That person will get locked up until they can pay you back your, what you loaned them, or what they owe you, I should say. So it's going to work out for everyone. Allegedly.
He just touched on, the concern, could it go to the integrity of sports, etc. But I'll just quickly say, I like that this is passed. I'm basically, consenting adults. Of course, there's always a limit to that, because if we think that there's enough societal harm from something, for example, certain hardcore drugs, then they're illegal or else severely regulated. And the idea is in gambling, like in alcohol consumption, a small minority of the users are the hardcore addicts that represent a vast majority of the business done. But that argument has failed for alcohol, it's failing for cannabis, and it has now, it looks like, failed for gambling. And
I don't believe that the argument has necessarily failed. I just think that they believe from a very Machiavellian sense that the ends justify the means. They're willing to sacrifice the more hardcore addicts, whether it's alcohol, drugs, and now gambling, for the sake of the monetary boon that they're going to make. Once again, if you were formerly a loan shark or a bookie, and you had to be concerned with how you were going to enforce the repayment of the debt, you don't have to do so anymore. You can report someone, you can take them to court, of course sue them for liability, because everything's on the up and up now. The only issue that you're going to have as a former bookie or loan shark is making sure that you're licensed, because I'm sure that each state is going to implement a licensing program so that you can be officiated on exactly what you're going to be allowed to do in regards to taking bets, so on and so forth.
decide on it being legal, you know, and when you know something is potentially harmful, and this goes for a lot of industries that peddle vice, if you know it's potentially harmful and can cause addiction, and 15% of the users will represent like 85% of the business because they have a problem, then I think the best policy is not to say it's illegal, but to, you know, strongly regulate it and be vigilant about it. But with strong regulation, I believe this is the right decision. No debate?
I think that it's the most lucrative decision. How right or wrong it is depends on the person, because each person is going to have a different level of vice in regards to their weakness for something. One person may need to use cannabis to assist them with seizures or some other physical ailment. Other people are going to use it so that they can space out. Certain people are going to utilize alcohol to help them relax. Others are going to utilize it to help them deal with some pain from their past. When it comes to sports betting, some people are going to make little $5 bets for fun. Other people are going to default on their mortgage because they're going to be spending so much money betting on the Jets every week.
Debate? No debate amongst the three of us. I will say this on 4 levels. This makes a ton of sense. I'll go through them quickly. Number one, constitutionally, I think the Supreme Court got it right. I don't think this is allowed under the 10th Amendment for the...
I agree. That's why I've stated that I believe that it's more of a return to the republic. It puts the onus on the states to determine exactly what the parameters are going to be for this business venture known as sports betting. It's also going to put the onus on each individual so-called citizen to be responsible for their own spending habits.
For the federal government to limit what states can do. Number two, I don't think it's right governmentally anyway. It's not the job of the federal government. This is a state-to-state type deal to let...
I agree once again. That's the same thing that I stated about net neutrality repeal, when all the neo-hippies and super liberals were running all across the internet talking about how the sky was falling. All that was going to do was put the onus on the state as opposed to the FCC to make sure that they moderate a lot of these fees on the internet. It's incumbent upon you as an individual citizen to be aware of what your state legislature is doing, so you become more of an involved member of this society, as opposed to sitting back and hoping that the federal government does right by you. Never expect someone else to do right by you.
Max, I think number three, you're absolutely right philosophically. Look, just because you make something legal doesn't mean you endorse it. Just because you say human beings are made to make mistakes or allowed to make mistakes is something that you condone. You don't. But you have to allow grown-ups to make their own decisions, even if they happen to be bad decisions from...
Exactly. Mr. Will Kane, you're on point with this one, sir. And beyond that, you're going to have more grown-ups, quote-unquote, making bad decisions, which is going to lead to more incarceration, which is more money for the state. Because all imprisonment is the utilizing of human beings as collateral for debts.
From time to time. And this is perhaps the most important. Number four, practically. It's happening anyway. Some minute percentage of sports gambling is happening legally through Las Vegas. It's happening all over the place with offshore betting apps. We're doing it. We're gambling on sports. There's a massive appetite for it. You might as well bring it into the light. Take it out of the darkness. Maybe you can regulate it better. Maybe you can make some money off of it from the leagues. If it's happening anyway, what are you doing? You're Sisyphus. You're pushing a boulder back up the hill over and over again to endless failure. Those 4 reasons, this makes an absolute ton of sense.
We're going to have a lot of people leaving work now to become professional gamblers?
Well, that's the thing, like they're already doing it.
Yeah, exactly. As Will Kane is about to say, they're already doing that. You have professional online gamblers as it is. So when people know what they're doing and they become very proficient at what they're doing, you can make a living off of just about anything.
Don't put it past some folks, Molly.
That's
Don't
what
put
I
it
think.
past some
Incredibly
folks.
bad
Some folks will do
idea,
that.
unless you have a very sophisticated model to make predictions. That is an incredibly bad idea.
Well, that's what the most elite bettors have, like a great poker player. When you understand the methodologies on how to win, it pretty much becomes something that's almost scientific.
Yeah, to become a professional gambler.
All right, we're going to leave it there, guys. An amazing run by this...
But anyway, that's the video on the legalizing of sports betting. We'll see where it goes from here. Peace.